Remakes. They are becoming more and more common in the gaming industry, and I want to talk about why that is and why I think they're a good thing. Before jumping into that though, it is important to understand what exactly is meant when discussing the term remake, as well as what a remaster is. There's a pretty clear difference between remasters and remakes. You see, remasters are games that primarily update the visuals of an older game. The graphics are redesigned or re-rendered at higher resolutions, and sometimes there are improvements to animations and audio quality too. It also gives developers a chance to iron out any bugs that were present in the original game. It's worth noting that these are mainly aimed at console players, as PC gamers can enhance their games via in-game settings or mods, meaning remasters aren't really necessary. There have been a lot of remasters, especially on the current generation of consoles, and whilst some can be lazy cash grabs that attempt to exploit nostalgia, they can also benefit a lot of people. You see, a lot of players may have missed out on certain games on the previous generation of consoles, especially any console exclusives. A good remaster offers a way to play these games in higher quality on a much more powerful console. In most cases, it is the better way to experience the game. Even though I was a PlayStation kid growing up, I never owned a PS3. The only chance I'd get to play one is when I went over to my cousin's house or a friend's. When The Last of Us released on PS4, I was ecstatic. I could finally play this game everyone was raving about. I also remember having a go playing Uncharted, and I always complained about the shooting. It was a mix of the mechanics and the DualShock 3's triggers. I just didn't find it comfortable at all. However, the Nathan Drake collection allowed me to experience all three games with better gameplay and better visuals. It was a win-win. You see, remasters then not only allow players to experience some of their favourite games in a more polished form, but they can also bring in entirely new audiences. Remakes, on the other hand, while sharing some similarities, are an entirely different beast. To put it simply, think of remasters as the DVD version of your favourite film that was once on VHS. It's going to look and sound way better, but everything else is exactly how you remember it. Remakes, on the other hand, are built from the ground up. They are created in an entirely new game engine with assets such as character models and environments made from scratch. Remakes are able to take advantage of the advancements in technology, and from an artistic point of view, it means that the technical limitations of older hardware and software are no longer constraining a developer's vision. What I mean by that is that developers may have had to limit themselves when making a game, either in the story or the gameplay due to the technology available when the original game was initially released. Now, this isn't really the case. When Resident Evil 2 first released in 1998, it was an outstanding game that was praised for its gameplay, visuals, and terrifying atmosphere. It's still today considered one of the best games of all time. The 2019 remake was able to take everything that made the original game amazing and improve upon it in nearly every aspect. The fixed camera was gone and replaced with an over-the-shoulder third-person perspective, which works wonders. I know some people wanted the fixed camera angle, but I feel like this works so much better. The horror feels a lot closer, and the auto-aim nature of fixed camera gameplay is gone, so instead shooting's a lot harder, which adds to the stress as a group of zombies approach you. Back when Resident Evil 2 released, fixed camera angles were pretty much a technical necessity. Nowadays it isn't. Not only that, but Mr. X was no longer tied to specific locations, but instead was a constant lingering threat who would always be hunting you down. In addition to the better gameplay, the graphics are fantastic, with beautiful lighting and extremely visceral gore. The sound design is also amazing, and is one of the reasons the game is as scary as it is. I've always said that sound is the most important component when it comes to horror, and this game has some of the best in recent memory. I would argue that Resident Evil 2 is the quintessential remake. It took advantage of the current technologies to bring it into the modern era, and retained everything the original did well in narrative and atmosphere. It is a much more intense and terrifying game because of this, and arguably the definitive way to experience the game. And that is what a remake should do. It should find ways to build upon and make improvements without taking anything away. It's important that developers understand what made the original game so great, and what changes need to be made, if any. Whilst the Resident Evil 2 remake has a different approach to gameplay, the core aspects and mechanics are still evident. Some remakes, however, will completely overhaul the game, making it incomparable to the original. The Final Fantasy VII remake is a prime example of this. When comparing the original groundbreaking game to its 2020 remake, it never fails to blow my mind. Putting a picture of characters in their 1997 polygon form next to their gorgeous remake counterparts is breathtaking. The remake expands upon the story and world in ways that were not possible when the original game was made. This is illustrated by Square Enix's decision to create multiple entries of the remake rather than one giant game, with the first installment focusing solely on the Midgar section of the game. Despite this, however, the game is still rich with content and can take players up to 40 hours to complete. This goes back to my point about the constraint on a developer's vision. Additionally, combat in the remake is a hybrid of real-time and turn-based attacks, which works beautifully, creating exhilarating combat instilled with a sense of strategy. This is completely different from the original's turn-based only combat, and that's not a bad thing. Does it mean that it is undeniably better than the original? No, of course not. Some players might prefer the classic turn-based combat over the newer system, and that's okay. The thing with remakes is that they don't instantly rid you of what came before. Those older games don't disappear as soon as a remake is released. If you want to experience the original game and prefer that over its remake, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Newer does not mean better after all. Maybe you don't like the remake because it just isn't as good as the original, either because of some debatable creative decisions, lack of care, or because you just prefer how it was before. And that's the thing, despite sharing similarities to the original, remakes can feel like entirely new games, and we might not like them. The key thing for a remake to do is be as good as we remember the original game being. As technology continues to advance and games become even more impressive, it only makes sense that audiences will want some of their favourite older games to be remade. I for one would love to see a Dino Crisis remake in the style of the Resident Evil 2 remake. I think that would be awesome. The reason for this high demand for remakes is because we are currently living in an era where audiences thrive off nostalgia, and the gaming industry knows that. Gamers are hungry for their favourite games to come back with a new breath of life, and it makes sense for publishers to capitalise on this. Nostalgia is an extremely powerful thing, reminding us of simpler times and fond memories and recollections when we were younger. Of course I'm going to want one of my favourite games when I was a kid remade. I want to play it again and have it on my shelf. It's emotionally satisfying and lets me relive something I thought I'd lost. On a less psychological level, some games may just benefit off today's technology and are deserving of an upgrade. And of course, there's a lot of money in it too. Although some people might argue that remakes are pointless and would rather have a sequel or an entirely new game, remakes can help that happen. A game that might not have done so well when it was first released can receive a second chance in a remake and potentially be more popular than it ever was. Developers may then decide to start making a new game and continue the franchise, not only pleasing old fans but new ones too. There have been some fantastic remakes. The Crash Bandicoot trilogy, the Spyro trilogy, Ratchet and Clank, and a lot more. These games are essentially the same game as when they first released, but look, sound, and feel way better to play. With the new generation of consoles on the horizon, I think we can expect developers to take advantage of the new impressive hardware these consoles boast by releasing more remakes. I for one look forward to them. There's something magical about seeing a 20-year-old game revitalized on modern consoles. Not only can it bring in completely new fans, but it can have players fall in love with it all over again. I don't usually do outros for these types of videos, but I just want to say a huge thanks to everyone that watched my Shadow of the Colossus video. It did way better than I expected, and yeah, I'm just really grateful for that. I didn't expect it to do that well. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you're looking forward to more content like this, then, hit that like button, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.